Welcome to our first full episode of Off the Grind Book Club. If you're feeling too burned out to deal with your burnout, you're in the right place. I'm Mari Appledorn.
And I'm Sarah Ransby. And this podcast is for everyone who considers themselves a helper in these challenging and sometimes depleting times. Each month, we're spotlighting someone doing important work to answer questions around how do we heal from depletion, compassion fatigue, and burnout.
And we are so excited to introduce our very first author and guest, and can't think of a better person for this first conversation, which is going to be in the space of therapists and mental health professionals. So welcome, Justine.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So let me tell the people about you.
Yes, please.
Justine Mastin, LMFT, LADC, is a psychotherapist, author, and so much more. Justine is proud to be an IFS certified therapist, an AAMFT approved supervisor, and a supervision mentor. Justine has co-authored 2 books and contributed to 11 others. And her most recent book, the one that we're going to be focusing on, is The Grieving Therapist, Caring for Yourself. There it is. Caring for yourself and your clients when it feels like the end of the world. She is honored to train the next generation of healers as adjunct faculty for MFT and LPCC students at the University of Massachusetts Global. Yay!
Yay!
Welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, we're thrilled.
Mm-hmm. Well, when we have our actual real life authors and thinkers with us, we have a series of questions that we want to be able to ask. So, Justine, are you ready for the first one?
Yeah, I'm ready. This is reminding me of Inside the Actor Studio, where Lipton would ask the series of questions like,
That's
what's your
right.
favorite sound? What's your least favorite sound?
Yes. On the index card every time. Yes.
But yes, I'm ready to tell you my most and least favorite sounds.
Yes. Wonderful. Well, here we go. Well, tell us what you think is important about you and what led you to write The Grieving Therapist, right? And I have my beautiful copy here too, because it's written all over, but yes, so tell us a little bit about you and kind of what led you to write this book.
Yeah. So I wrote this with my best friend and writing partner, Larissa Agarski, who's also an LMFT. We are long distance best friends. She used to live in Minneapolis, where I am. But about 6 years ago, she moved to Chicago. And I didn't know this, but she has told me that when she moved away, she made a silent pledge to herself that we would not lose touch, and that, the way to keep in touch with me is to do a project with me. And so we started doing a podcast together, and then we co-authored our first book, Starship Therapies, Using Therapeutic Fan Fiction to Rewrite Your Life. We're both big nerds, geeks. I include punk and queer in my, the box in which I sit. And so that's some of my background. I've been in the healing space for over a decade. Before I was a therapist, I was a yoga teacher. And before that, I was a person and experienced grief, which caused me to kind of change the trajectory of my life. But the way the book came about, very mundane. Our editor said, okay, Starship Therapies has, gone off into the world, and now what do you want to write? And so we were brainstorming a few ideas. There were a couple of other ones on there. And I said to Larissa, I really want to write a book about how awful it is to be a therapist. Because we were still in the midst of the pandemic, and we had actually written Starship Therapies entirely during the pandemic. We signed our contract in January 2020. Yeah. So she was like, okay, I'm not really into that, but we can put it on the list of things for our editor to choose from. Surely the editor isn't going to choose that one. And out of all of the ideas, editor was like, I really like the idea of this grieving therapist thing. Mm-hmm. And so Larissa and I had to have some conversations. the reason she had trepidation was she was like, we're going to have to feel all these feelings again. Like, you remember how bad that all felt, right? And in my and Larissa's dynamic, I am Kirk and she is Spock. And if you're not familiar, friends at home, with Star Trek, Kirk is very like, he's boisterous, he's got bravado, he's like, let's just go out into the universe and see what happens. And Spock is like, maybe we should check and make sure that we have enough fuel to go that far out into the universe. And so for me, I was like, we don't have to feel feelings. We're just going to write about the feelings that we had. Well, what don't you understand?
Past tense.
Right. The reality, of course, is that, you know, Spock was very right in this situation, but we probably wouldn't have even suggested writing this book if I had had a sense of how incredibly difficult it was going to be to write. But the reason it felt important to me, I had felt incredibly unseen during the pandemic as a healer. And for any healers out there who worked during the pandemic, it was a very difficult time to be a therapist. And we were dealing with our own transition. Many of us worked in office and then suddenly we were online. That was really uncomfortable for my system. Also, we were having the same conversation all day, every day. And clients expected us to know something magically that we couldn't possibly know. And all over media outlets, it was like, thank goodness for the first responders, which, yes, I take nothing away from them. Their work was horrific. And who did they go tell all of those horrific stories to?
Mm-hmm.
Us. Mm-hmm. And no one's banging pots and pans or sending us pizzas. That's all toxic positivity anyway. That's not what I wanted, but I just felt unseen, unheard. And I felt like if I feel that way, healers everywhere probably feel that way too. And can we offer them something? Mm-hmm. And we did.
Yeah.
Offering. Mm-hmm.
And, you know, so as a reader, talk about feeling seen. I mean, the structure of this book is a journey, literally. And, you know, the two of you are talking at times about some pretty complicated stuff, right? Systemic stuff and deep stresses on therapists and healing principles. And you're integrating all of this information from like internal family systems to spirituality to collective trauma, you know, political polarization and grief. And that's a tremendous thing to do. But the way you and Larissa do it, it's so holistic and clear and evocative. I mean, it's sensory and you use play and characters. And I was saying to Sarah, like, it felt at times like I was watching this incredibly compelling film or a series of one acts instead of being asked to digest a really complicated text. So it was so clearly designed for the depleted therapist. And it really feels like, to me, less like, here is what you do when you are depleted, and much more like, here, come along with us, right? Be nourished. Here are some things to really consider and look at deep healing. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings us to our second question, actually, which is, from your point of view, what do you consider to be some of the most important, you know, ideas, takeaways, or questions in The Grieving Therapist?
Yeah, what I was hoping to convey is that the landscape of our work has changed, but the systems in which we do our work have really stagnated. Like, we've stopped dreaming as an industry about what's possible and have just sort of accepted what mostly third-party payers have handed to us and said is the way we need to work. And the thing about hand-me-downs is heirlooms can be beautiful and we might want to keep them, but we might not. And there's a part in the book where we talk about different grieving tools, different, you know, things you can do to work with your grief. And one of them is the return to sender tool. And this is about taking a look at those heirlooms that you've been given, deciding whether they serve you, and then if not, how to return to sender. And we actually even have physical cards available through my sister-in-law's company, Grief, which is a grieving card company, not a greeting card company. It is for writing to those who have passed on or to ephemeral concepts that we can't exactly engage with. And my invitation to folks is that we have community. So often we are, siloed because, if we're in private practice but we have community. We're allowed to have community. I invite us to have community, and I invite us to speak loudly, take up space, and show up as our authentic selves. Especially in a world where third-party payers are kind of the boss, which I'm hoping we can shift. Speaking truth to power and being ourselves is a radical political act. And that is directly taken from the work of Audre Lorde. So hat tip to her.
Yeah, I feel like I just want to hold a little bit for all that to sink in, right? Because I think, yeah, absolutely right on that. And Justine, if I could maybe just offer my reflection of the book at this point, because
that sparks so much joy for me. Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember what you're talking about in this book around return to sender, and it was just a really profound read for me. I think I might be a little bit in Larissa's camp, though, in the sense of when you told me about this great book, I probably carried it around in my backpack for a month or two. And I was like, I just am not sure that I have enough time and distance from the pandemic to do what I need to around this.
Yeah.
And yet I think for therapists, there's always this call to action of how do we stay ahead of our clients? How do we stay ahead of our supervisees in processing our own stuff so we can stay embodied in the tough moments? So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do
it. I'm gonna feel a feeling.
Yeah, exactly. But what I found was it was such a gentle read, I think, for all the reasons that Mari talked about, right? And you talking about around building community. And I was really impressed with how it allowed me to process my experiences, kind of as me, Sarah, but also as a therapist, as a supervisor, as a teacher. And so it was really interesting to kind of move through those different parts of myself as I was processing this read. And I think when I got to the end of the book, I was really amazed with how much more integrated I was in myself around these experiences. And you did this really beautiful thing of helping us zoom out, because it was so much more than the pandemic, right? There was so much going on in the last 4 years that it was really profound to kind of say this just wasn't about the pandemic, but so much that weighed on our individual and our collective nervous systems. And then you did this really cool thing of zooming in and helping us to think about what are all the nuanced needs we have as therapists and as humans. And so just as you and Larissa guided us on this journey, I just, to me, was, this topic that I don't even want to touch, to, processing your book and coming away significantly more integrated around my experiences. So I really thank you for that.
Thank you. Oh, it's so good to hear, because of course that's our intention, but also, you can set all the intentions in the world, but they don't always land. So.
That's right. Oh, well, they sure did for me, right? I just really appreciated your book. So next we wanted to ask, because we know that there's a lot of helpers out there that are struggling with huge levels of depletion and have a hard time taking on new things. So for people who can't yet read your work, and if they're maybe struggling with some depletion and burnout, what are some takeaways that you would want people to have from this conversation, or to kind of, take away from this?
Yeah. First up, friends, if you feel too depleted to sit down and read with your eyes, I narrate the audiobook. So if you're enjoying these dulcet tones, you can have them in your ears for 10 hours. Um, so just, I always like to bring that up because people don't always know there's an audio version. And I mean, especially for folks whom I know or who have heard me on podcasts or, YouTubes like this, they're like, oh, I don't mind that lady's voice. Because sometimes, the author doesn't read the book and you don't know. And so anyway, I'm just throwing that out there. But the thing about the book is that it's so experiential, and we intended it to be that way. I mean, in the preface, we are very specific to say, hey, if you picked this up to get cognitive about grief and like your favorite grief theorists, this is not going to land the way that you think it will. But speaking to what you both have said, like the intention is to feel as though you are wandering through the dark, desolate wilderness, and suddenly you see a campfire through the trees and realize that you are not alone, and that all of these other travelers have converged on this point and thought they were alone in the desolate wilderness. And our intention was to create this feeling of we are all around the campfire, we are all holding each other, and everyone you have ever known and all of the parts inside of you are also accessible at this campfire. And even though we might not physically be with you while you're reading this book, the hope is that it feels that way. So my takeaway for folks who feel like they just can't go there right now, you're not alone. You're really not. And I know that it can feel that way. And just know that when you are ready to go to the ephemeral campfire, that we're all there. And even if you decide never to go there, we're still there.
Mm-hmm. I think I just want to add a response to that before we move on to the next thing we wanted to ask you, because that sense of calling into community, I feel like you and Larissa do that in so many different ways. You do it in terms of you don't have to heal from this by yourself. No one should have to heal from this by yourself. But also as you, I don't want to say normalize because there's nothing normal about it, but really validate and articulate that this wasn't just a depletion that therapists have gone through over the last 4 years is not a personal problem.
Yes.
Then you really bring in this concept of it's actually a collective trauma. It's even moral injury. And these are things that we need a community. We need each other to heal from. And I think you come back to that over and over again, and it really spoke to me. So.
Thank you. Yes, one of my personal pet projects, and I'm actually going to be returning to grad school pretty soon, to pursue a PhD this time. It's third time's the charm on grad school, I guess. But my intention is this system has become so disorganized and fractured. Or rather not organized in a way that puts therapists first, that puts healers first. And my hope is to find some way to start reorganizing this system to allow healers to be the artists that we are. Hopefully future generations of therapists will feel like they're at the campfire before they even need to be invited. That's my hope.
Yes. Beautiful. All right. Now we're going to kind of take a turn. We're going to zoom in, as Sarah was saying. And this is the final question that we thought would be kind of fun and playful and interesting to ask folks, which what Justine, is a way that you take care of yourself that might surprise people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this isn't going to surprise people who know me, but it will probably surprise people who don't. I am a power builder, which is a power lifter slash bodybuilder. I've been doing that for about 4 years since the pandemic. Um, I was again motivated by grief. You know, the grief of losing my father in 2009 motivated me to become a healer. And the grief of the loss of my mother in 2019 motivated me to spend more time with me and be mindful of that which I need. And I started going to the gym with no intention of, becoming a gym rat. But I found that I really took to it and I loved it and I love it. And I am at the gym several hours most days. I have community there. It's a way to get into my body and out of my head. And I've always moved my body as a way to take care of myself. Initially, I was a dancer, and that's got its own baggage, right? And then I was a yoga teacher, and that's got its own stuff. And it's not that the power building world doesn't have its own stuff too, but what I am really committed to is not becoming a personal trainer. Because I'm quite good at this. I think I would be a very good one. I don't want this to be a job. I don't want the movement of my body, which is bringing me joy, to be a job, because in the past, when I have turned joy into a job, it becomes joyless. And so that's how I take care of me.
That is awesome.
Yeah, that really is good. Well, Justine, we just wanted to hold a little space to ask if there's anything that you want to share with our community today that we haven't asked about, or anything that feels important that we haven't gotten to in our conversation yet.
Yeah. I just want to invite folks to be open to picking up this book. I understand how it can sound scary and like just one more book that's telling you what you're doing wrong. And that was so far from what we wanted to present. We really wanted to say, here is this experiential of being held and telling you you're already doing great. You yourself are worthy, worthwhile. Like, we're not going to tell you to be different. We're going to invite you to show up authentically 100% as you, and have other therapists with you, have some guides in the form of animals. And if you're thinking to yourself, friends at home, how do they do that? We just do. It's some magical realism that we bring in, right? And
it works. It works.
Totally.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's very narrative. Like,
yeah.
I, as an aside, when I teach about theory and I teach about Carl Whitaker, I would always call him the honey badger of marriage and family therapy, because he doesn't give a. And so when we were writing about Carl Whitaker, I was like, well, he's a honey badger. He already is one. Let's just go the extra mile. Just make him a honey badger.
Whitaker don't care.
Right?
Yeah, Whitaker don't care. If he were around, he wouldn't care. He'd be like, yeah, get in there, mess up that system. Right, but we've created things that are playful, and we're not afraid to go into the dark stuff, but also embracing the duality that where there is dark, there is naturally light. And we systemically, as humans, we're so black and white, and we're like, well, if it's dark, then it can never be light. It's like, actually, if it's dark, there has to be light, and vice versa. And so how can we be in both grief and gratitude, both sadness and joy? And that's what we hope that we've invited people into, and being really playful and whimsical and very much ourselves. It's one of my, it's one of the things I get up on a pedestal about, is when I work with new therapists or therapists who've been in the business for a long time, is like, where is you? Where are you? And how are you bringing you into your therapy? Because like, if you look behind me, my clients see all of this. This is informed consent. Do you want to work with this person? No? That's cool. But if you do, wow, you know what you're opting into. And I don't need to pretend to be someone I'm not, and fracture myself in order to heal. So please come as your whole self to the campfire. And we've got a warm mug and an open ear waiting to support you.
So I think everyone who's listening can probably tell by now why we thought that Justine would be the perfect first person to interview on this podcast, because that is what Off the Grind Book Club is all about. That healing does not have to be strenuous, nor should it be in service of others. So we are so grateful for your energy and time and your wisdom and this amazing book. And before we end, so this is a little something that we're going to be doing every episode. Sarah and I want to be sure that we're practicing what we preach as we think about replenishment and healing depletion. And so the question we're going to check in with each other about, and Justine, we'll ask you if you have anything to add to this, is the next month or so before the next time we come together to do another one of these, what are we going to be doing? What are we looking forward to? What are we anticipating that's going to be just for us? So I'll start, and something that certainly not everybody knows about how I take care of myself is I joined a little handbell choir, and which I love so much. And it was a real debate with myself about how do I carve out that hour plus a week of time. And I have to say, that time with those people every week gives me such a sense of community and shared creativity and just unbridled joy. And we have 2 performances coming up this month, and it's going to be great. So I'm looking forward to that. Sarah, how about you? What have you got going on this month for yourself?
Well, I have a 9-year-old swimmer in my house. And so I am going to savor my trips to the pool, because sometimes they can feel like I have to. But I'm coming to find, because I'm a basketball player, I am not a swimmer. So this is a new world to me. And I think a lot of people don't like the pool because it's really hot. But I am never warm in these winter and spring months. And I love to sit in the pool. It just feels like a warm hug. I bring my crocheting, my books on my phone, and it's just a little bit of me time. So instead of like having it be this thing I have to do, I'm going to have it be this thing that I get to savor and create some self-care in the midst of.
So mine. I'm going to go a little further out than a month. I will of course be getting to the gym. Don't worry. And there are a few things that I could bring up that are sparking joy for me. But this is a pretty big thing that is for others, but mostly it's for me. And that is, I had a headstone made for my parents. They have not had a headstone. After my dad passed, his ashes stayed with my mother. And when my mother passed, I had them both interred. And it felt very important to me to have a handmade tombstone for them. They were very unique humans, and I felt like I wanted to honor them with the ritual of a hand-carved stone. And so I found a headstone carving mason. There's about a dozen in the country. And I commissioned a stone, and it depicts some of the things that were very meaningful to them on the top of it, with their names, dates of life and death, and then Ave Atque Vale, which is hail and farewell. Mm-hmm. And we will finally, after a long journey of, finding the stonemason and then getting slate in a time when there's a slate shortage and having it made, it is complete, and it will be placed in May. And so while this is to honor my parents, it is very much a ritual letting go for me, to be able to place that, have that monument to honor them and to honor my grief and the grief of all who miss them. So it's a big deal and something I've been looking forward to, and also it's sad. It's both, right? Here's the
grief and gratitude, right? It's all of it.
Yep.
Thank you for sharing that, Justine. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Justine. Your book is a huge gift to the therapy and the healing community. I just feel so grateful to have read it myself in my own healing journey. And so really thank you to you and Larissa for providing that for us.
Thank you so much.
Well, and as we head out today, we just also want to thank our community that's here with us today. And as we kind of think about this campfire theme and moving towards community, just thank you again for everyone who has joined us, and just kind of this continued journey to get off of the grind together.
Thanks, everybody.